Called the meeting to order at 6:30 PM on Monday, August 1st, the year 2022, and I would look for a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make that.
Thank you, Bruce. Do I have a second?
I can second that.
Megan? We need a roll call, I believe.
Okay, let's see, Howery,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Fisher, yes, Mooney,
Yes.
and Fessler.
Yes.
We will move to our closed session quarters, and
I will be ending the webinar and reopen it when they return to open session.
there we go. Okay, we are back in open session at 7:07, and we are to the consent agenda item portion of our agenda, and our consent agenda contains minutes from the July 18th, 2022 school board meeting. It also contains some professional staffing recommendations, and some personnel items that are not necessary for vote. So I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda item as presented, excluding section 3D.
I will second that. I will make the motion, sorry.
Okay, Kate, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Megan?
Mhm.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. That brings us to our public comments. And I have a little read here before we get started. In accordance with School Board Policy 167.3, the McFarland School Board welcomes public comment during regular meetings. The board will accept public comments via individuals who are physically present at the board meeting, who are participating in the board meeting virtually, or who have sent an email to the board president or superintendent in advance of the meeting. Please note the following. Register. Participants are required to register their intention to participate in the noticed public comment portion of the meeting upon their arrival at the meeting, and shall begin their comments by stating their name, address, and group affiliation if and when appropriate. Secondly, topics. Participants shall address only topics within the legitimate jurisdiction of the board. The board members will not directly respond to comments and may only take action on topics that are on the published agenda. Third, time. Participants are asked to limit their comments to 5 minutes in duration. Written comments will have a word limit of 250 words. The portion of the meeting for public comments is limited to 60 minutes unless extended by a vote of the board. And lastly, decorum. Participants shall direct all comments to the board and observe reasonable decorum. So having said all that, Angie, do we have any public comment this evening?
I have not received any public comment for this evening, and I would like to at this time to invite any members of the public who are participating via Zoom that if you would like to make a public appearance by speaking to the board, please utilize the Q&A portion found at the bottom of your Zoom window. In the Q&A, we would ask that you type your name, address, subject of interest, and whether you have discussed this item prior to the meeting with either a district administrator or President Howery. After submitting the information, I would then transfer you over to speak to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
If you'd like to give them a minute to register.
Give it a minute.
If anyone would like. I have not had anyone register at this time.
Okay, then we will move along to the informational part of our agenda, and we're going to start out with a Hera Sustainability Landfill Project presentation by John Welch, Director of the Dane County Department of Waste and Renewables. Mr. Welch, thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you.
And the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for, school board, for allowing us to come tonight and present. First, want to say thank you to Jeff for reaching out to me early on, and then also to Aaron to talking with me over the last several weeks. And I come initially just saying apologies for not engaging with the school district prior to this. This is, in our opinion, a very long, drawn-out process, but quite frankly, we missed the ball in not engaging with the school district earlier in this process, so I apologize for that. Our goal and our hope here is to open those lines of communication and continue to have those discussions with the school board as this project moves along through the next several years. So we are talking about what we have termed the sustainability campus. There's kind of two main pieces to that. There's a sustainable business park piece and then the landfill itself. And we understand there's a lot of concerns within the neighborhoods, within the community, and potentially within the school district as well. So we would like to try to kind of touch upon what this project is, what we do as a department, and hopefully we can address some of those concerns and then talk about how we can continue to engage with each other moving forward. Next slide, please. So just start out, these are some of the key members of our team that'll be working on this project. So you can always feel free to reach out to me with that email there. My cell phone is also available on our website. Roxanne Linkus is my deputy director. She's here as well. So feel free to reach out to either of us, but you'll also probably see the other folks on this page at some point throughout the project. So this is just our existing site on the left-hand side there. This is kind of covering all the great things that we do at our site. We are a government agency and we provide a lot of services to the community related to waste and recycling and renewable energy. So a lot of people know that we run a landfill, but we have a lot of other features at this site. We do recycling for tires, shingles, metal, bicycle recycling program that gets bikes back into the hands of kids that wouldn't otherwise have access to bicycles. Wood yard, which has been really active with emerald ash borer and the recent storms as well. We do construction and demolition recycling, so anything that would go in a construction dumpster. We have a clean sweep program that's open year round. And we convert landfill gas to renewable vehicle fuel as well. And then you see on the bottom there, education and tours. That's a huge part of what we do. And I think there's a lot of tie-ins on how we can collaborate with the school district in that aspect as well. Just some of the overview things in the last year or so of our department. We have taken landfill gas and produced renewable vehicle fuel that's displaced over 2.5 million gallons of gasoline. Again, that's produced off of landfill gas and garbage. We've recycled over 82,000 tons of construction and demolition materials. Over the last several years, we've actually planted over 100 acres of prairie grass on top of the landfill and at one of our clay borrow sites. That's just our department. That's not countywide. That's our department only. And then we've had over 10,000 visitors at our trash lab, which is, I'll talk a little bit later. It's a mobile exhibit that helps us educate our community about waste and recycling. So this is our mission, to provide environmentally sound and sustainable waste management and renewable energy solutions for both current Dane County residents and future generations. And that's a picture actually from the top of our landfill. You can see the prairie grass plantings in the foreground, and in the background is our renewable natural gas facility at our site. Construction and demolition, I'll just touch on this briefly, but it's a great example. Keep this in mind when I'm talking later about our vision for the new site, because this is really a great example of what could happen there with other materials. So this facility, we take in construction and demolition materials. Anything that goes into a dumpster at a construction site used to go to the landfill, that now goes into this facility. And it's part of the reason it's a great example is it's a really good public-private partnership. So the county built the facility, we own all of the equipment inside, but we actually work with a private entity to operate this, market and sell the recyclable materials on the back end. Next slide, please. So we've created about 15 jobs just locally on the site. There's other jobs related to trucking, marketing, and other things for this facility. But starting in the top left there, you can see it comes in as a completely commingled pile of waste. It goes to the top right then through a series of mechanical equipment that separates it out primarily by size into 4 different waste streams. And in the bottom left, it goes across conveyor belts where we have workers pulling materials out. And so one worker may be dropping wood into bin number 5 there, and the next worker may be dropping metal into bin number 6. It goes through those bins down underneath the floor, and in the bottom right you can see it goes into bunkers or big garages, and you end up with clean sorted wood, metal, aggregate, etc. So that pile at the top left turns into those sorted recyclable materials that are kept out of the landfill in the bottom right. We also have our clean sweep program, which is where paints, chemicals, fertilizers, and electronics recycling happen. We are open more than any other clean sweep program in the state. So again, it's a service that we provide to the community. It costs us several $100,000 a year, but it's something that we are very passionate about. This picture here is our free store, our product exchange room. Anything that comes into our facility, into the Clean Sweep facility that's non-toxic, non-hazardous, and at least half full, we put it on these shelves and members of the community can come in and grab them for free, totally free, and take those. You don't have to be a landfill customer, you don't have to be paying a fee, you can just come in and grab whatever you might need from that. The landfill gas piece I talked about a little bit, but as garbage breaks down, it does produce gas. Gas is a methane gas, is about 50% of the makeup. The gas that heats, the quote-unquote natural gas that heats your home is about 96% methane. So it's the same gas, it's an energy source, and how can we use it as an energy source? Not all landfills do this, but we do. We really look at it as an energy source and how can we reuse that. So for over 25 years, we had taken that energy and produced renewable electricity with it. We've used it as a fuel in engines that spun generators. For a lot of reasons, that market has changed, and in the last few years, we've switched over. The county and our department has invested $29 million into the facility you see in the bottom right corner there, that picture. So it's a large gas processing plant that takes the landfill gas and cleans up all those other elements in the gas and gets us to that 96% pure methane that we can now put into the pipeline. It can be compressed, and it's compressed natural gas or CNG vehicle fuel. So the county's plow trucks, our vehicles, we have over 100 county vehicles in 12 different departments that run off of compressed landfill gas. And then the remainder that we don't use, we actually sell to Quick Trip, and they sell it to their fleet customers that run off of CNG vehicle fuel. Again, as I mentioned, education and tours are a huge part of what we do. This is a great picture of a diorama that we have inside our trash lab. It's a new exhibit that we just rolled out in the last 2 years. There's a collaboration between us and the Madison Children's Museum. I'm an engineer, I'm not an artist, and I'm not very artistic or imaginative, so what they produced is really incredible. It's really interactive, it's colorful, kids come in and just are drawn to it. And we've had over 10,000 visitors in the last two years to that exhibit itself. It's in a trailer, so we can move it around. It's mobile. We take it to festivals, community events. We were at the McFarland Public Works Day this year. It's been to one of the schools here in the district this year as well already. Next, please. These are some more pictures of that exhibit. You can just kind of see what I was saying, how colorful and imaginative it is. Bottom left there is a magnet puzzle that kids solve to figure out what the recyclables they put in their recycling bin get turned into afterwards. The stuff on top of the ceiling in that bigger picture there, that's all waste materials that were pulled out of the waste stream and cleaned up to get people to think about their waste and have a connection to it. Next slide, please. Again, it isn't just the trash lab. We have a long history of engagement in education. Prior to COVID, we would do over 150 tours a year at our site, primarily school age groups. We have a school bus program, so if a school district or a classroom can't afford to bring their kids because of the bus fee, we'll actually pay for that bus fee to make sure that those kids can come to our site still and tour our site. We have done, in the last, this spring, some members of our staff came into the district here and did STEM presentations. We brought the trash lab on site, as I mentioned as well. We did do tours. We were able to start back up the tours with, I believe it's the third graders at our site this year. It was missed for a couple of years because of COVID, but other than that, they've actually been coming to our site every year for 25 years. So it's a long relationship that we've had with the district, and we're really excited. We really roll out the red carpet for that group to come. Our whole staff is on site for about 3 days just doing tours for that group of kids. It's really exciting. We've had some initial discussions and engagement with the Eco Club and with Jeff, and I think we're looking at other opportunities that we can to continue that engagement. But why am I here and why are we talking about this new site? So this is the timeline right now. At our current site, we do a lot of great things, but quite frankly, we're running out of space. If we do nothing, we will be full in about 5 years. If we are working right now on an expansion at that site, if that is successful, it only gets us to 2030. So we need to start looking at alternative or additional sites for a new landfill. Next slide, please. Typically, that permitting process takes anywhere from 5 to 7 years, so that's why we really need to be beginning that process now. So as I talk about that, when you look at landfill siting design process, there's a lot of challenges and limitations which start to narrow down where could it physically be located. So there's state statutes and there's codes that have setbacks to waterways, to private wells, to municipal wells, to parks, roadways, et cetera. There's other things, I know you guys have heard some, just I think commentary recently about wetlands and other impacts, hydrogeologic concerns we have to look at. So there's a lot that goes in the DNR, environmental review and permitting. And so as you look at the county as a whole, you start to run out of places that you can physically locate a landfill. Another big one is the airport. You have to be 5 miles away from any major airport. So right there, that takes out a good chunk of the county as well.
Why is that, that 5-mile limit from the airport?
They're concerned about birds from the landfill causing impacts at the airport. So back in the 90s, we were actually permitting a site in Westport, just to the east of Wanakee, and had gone through about half of the process, and the FAA changed the rules. I think it was 3 or 3.5 miles. They changed it to 5 miles while we were in the middle of that permitting process, and that's 4.8 miles away from the airport, so had to abandon that site. Next slide, please. But as we look at the landfill, I want to make sure that you understand this isn't like your grandparents' town dump. It's an engineered sanitary landfill. They're very different today than what you hear. So it's easy to Google, landfill pollution or landfill concerns, and I always kind of like to say it's like if I Googled my health symptoms, I pretty quickly think that I'm dying of 3 different things, right? So if you Google landfill concerns, you're probably going to pull up a lot of cases of hazardous waste landfills from the 70s that are unlined, or these environmental impacts and concerns that happen at landfills that were actually dump sites in the 70s and 80s. The way that they're built today is a much higher standard. There's a ton of environmental review steps that go into evaluating whether the site is actually even a good candidate. But then once that happens, there's a lot that goes into the engineering and design to make sure that we're protecting the environment. And really you look at kind of 2 main areas of protecting the human health and the environment. The first is to make sure that no liquids are getting out the bottom and impacting groundwater or surface waters. And then the second is to make sure that we're not allowing gas and air emissions to escape from the top. So this picture here is kind of a cut through of the liner at the bottom to show all the different pieces and steps that go into protecting groundwater at the bottom of a landfill. So the very bottom is 4 feet of compacted clay. It's put in 8 different lifts. Every one of those is tested to make sure that we get good compaction and it's the right type of materials. Above that, there's a 60 mil HDPE membrane. So that's just fancy engineering speak for about an 1/8 inch thick, really high density plastic liner that gets rolled out across. And actually, if we could skip to the next picture, this is kind of a good point to show you what some of that looks like. So this is a picture where the clay liner is down and the black plastic is starting to be rolled out over the top. Above this black plastic, there'll be a fabric sheet to protect it, and then a 1 foot thick layer of stone will be pushed out across all of that. The whole thing is sloped down to the middle and then down to one end, kind of like a bathtub. So any liquids that hit that stone will drain quickly to the middle, they'll get collected in a pipe, and it'll quickly drain to one end where we can pump those out. So liquids, garbage leachate, that's leaching out of the garbage, will hit this, it'll get collected quickly and pumped out so it's not sitting on that liner. If for some reason that fails, we still have that black plastic liner. If for some reason that fails, we have 4 feet of compacted clay. If for some reason all of that fails, we actually have environmental monitoring around the entire site. So we actually have to monitor dozens and dozens of monitoring points every single month. And in the 35 years that we've been at this site, we've seen no evidence in our monitoring of any type of environmental impact leaving our landfill.
What do you do with the leachate?
So leachate gets pumped out. In our case, it actually gets pumped directly into the sewer system and then to Madison Metropolitan Sewage District.
Okay.
Yeah. Some sites that are more remote may have to treat it on site or truck it to a wastewater treatment plant, but not in our case. One other thing I forgot to mention here with this black plastic, you can see the gentleman on the left-hand side, he's welding 2 sheets of plastic together. So as you roll out a new roll, you actually have a 6-inch overlap on the seam, and you weld that on both sides with a heat fusion welder. And then you have an air pocket in the middle. Every one of those air pockets is actually pressure tested to make sure that's a good weld. And then a number of those welds are cut out and tested in the field or tested in the lab. And when it's all said and done, and the stone is on here, we do an electroresistivity test. So they wet all that stone. In this case, it was about a 12-acre site. We wet all the stone. We put an electrical charge in the stone. and they go outside of the construction site, and we put another electrical charge in the soil on the edge of our site. And that black plastic acts like an insulator to stop that electrical circuit from being completed. And if there's even a tiny hole like the size of a pencil lead, a little bit of current gets through there, and we have devices that can detect that. So before we ever put any garbage in here, we know for a fact there are no holes in this black plastic liner at the bottom of our landfill. So sorry, I got a little technical there, but I want to make sure that you understand. Again, it's not the dumps of the 70s and 80s. There's a lot that goes into environmental protection. Next slide, please. I won't get as technical here, but this is the cap. So after we're all done placing waste, we built a cap over the top to prevent gas emissions. It's not exactly the same, but it's about 90% the same as the liner flipped upside down. So just think of all those clay, geomembrane, plastic liners flipped upside down and put on top of the landfill as well. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of that cap construction happening about 5 years ago. And then everything that you see here that's dirt or plastic is about 32 acres, and we actually did prairie grass plantings instead of normal plantings. So the first landfill in Wisconsin to do a large prairie planting on top of a landfill, and the DNR is definitely watching this. They're very interested, and they're hoping other sites will follow our lead on this. Next slide. I've already talked about this, but protection of groundwater, the liner. This is just an example of some of the monitoring that happens around our site. We have dozens of monitoring points, again, that have to be monitored on a monthly basis per our permit with the DNR. Those results are reported into the DNR, and they're all available online if anybody would like to look, spend hours and hours looking through analytical data. But the summary is that we've seen no impacts or evidence of any type of environmental impacts from our site since we've been there since 1985. So I've talked a lot about the landfill, and we do want to build a landfill at the new site, but that's just a piece of it. We see this site serving the community for decades to come. And so as we think about that in 10, 20, 30 years from now, we don't want to be managing our waste in the same way that we are today. We want to be recycling more. We want to be diverting more things from the landfill. And that's really a goal of ours. And so we're going from this old paradigm of waste as a liability to looking at it as a resource. These are resources that are being wasted and being thrown away. How can we divert them to a higher, better use and a second life? So we want this new site to be a place where we have a recycling business park, and we're encouraging businesses to come in. Perhaps we can recycle mattresses, additional electronics, food waste, have a reuse center, kind of like Habitat Restore, but they have a drop-off right at our front gate. So we see that all the time. Every single day, people come in with totally usable, great materials, and we say, hey, there's a Restore 4 miles away. And they're like, no, too much work. I want a one-stop shop, right? So La Crosse County actually has that at their landfill. They have a Restore drop-off at the front gate of the landfill. So having things like that built into the design of this site so we can intentionally divert more materials and encourage recycling businesses locally here in the community.
What kind of, under the third bullet,
Yeah, sorry.
talking about the vision, what type of recreation are you referring to before,
Yeah.
after, and during?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in the beginning stages of planning for that, and that's a great opportunity to engage with the school district and the community in general on what would you like to see. So the site itself is about 200 acres. Probably 30 acres will be business park, and maybe another 30 or so acres will be used at any one time for landfill. So you can imagine you have over 100 acres left over still that for 20, 30 years aren't going to be used for waste activities. So how can we phase development of the landfill so maybe that 100 acres has dog parks, walking trails, cross-country skiing, disc golf, mountain biking. I'm just throwing ideas out there, but we want to engage with the community on what would you like to see as a resource for the community there.
And that would be level space
Yep.
until you use it for something.
And then as the landfill fills and closes and you move into those areas, you can use the closed area for recreation again. So our existing landfill, that we call Rodefeld landfill, we're already starting that planning process. Again, we have a lot of it planted in prairie grass, so can we put walking trails through there, viewing areas at the top? We have a lot of wetlands that we restored to the north of our site, so can we put boardwalks through the wetlands? How do we bring the community in and make that a resource that people can use long term?
I know Common Walk, but that's an old site,
Mhm.
but they use it for skiing.
Yep, they use skiing. Marathon County has a really extensive mountain bike trail system on their old landfill, so there's a lot of opportunities there. Next slide, please. So again, just looking at this, circular economy. How do we take things, instead of extracting them from the ground, using them once, throwing them away and filling landfills up to, how do we bring those materials back into the circular economy, put them back into the economy as feedstocks for businesses? And how do we do that locally? Because for the longest time, we were so dependent on China recycling all of our stuff that when they said no, everything was disrupted all over America. So how do we here locally in Dane County create that kind of economy so we're not so impacted by those market disruptions that can happen, internationally? So this is a very early conceptual idea of what the sustainability campus could look like. This would be on the north side, kind of fronting 12 and 18 and AB, that intersection there. A lot of opportunities for education built into this. So we want to have viewing areas where people can come in and actually see materials being recycled, come in and see how these things are done. But this is very early. So right now we have an RFP out to hire a consultant to help us to figure this out, to figure out what materials could be recycled, what do the business plans look like for that, what types of businesses could come in here. And so as part of their work, which will be happening over the next year to year and a half, they will have public listening sessions. We will actually reach out to the district and ask for your input directly on what could this look like, both in terms of the businesses, but especially in terms of the education. How could we interact with the school district and students and include education into this plan? I kind of talked about this already, but you can see there's tons of opportunities. Again, we used to get 150 tours pre-COVID, so how do we continue to engage with the newest, or the next members of our community, the next leaders in our community? It's really important. We also see a lot of opportunities with school districts near this site, of course, and with the Ho-Chunk Nation. So they have plans for a cultural education center on their site, and we see a lot of opportunities to talk about what we do with conservation, with recycling, with the prairie plantings, and what they would like to teach at their site as well. So hopefully a lot of potentials for collaboration. And again, just, having this be a resource for the community. I maybe kind of forgot to mention this, but we don't generate garbage, right? We all generate garbage. So Dane County Waste and Renewables manages the waste that our community produces. And so, that's a service that we take very seriously to the community. It's important. If we don't take it, it has to go somewhere. And so as a community, we don't think it's the proper thing to say, we're just going to ship it all to some other county, or we're going to ship it an hour and a half away and fill up a landfill there. So we want to handle our materials here in the most environmentally responsible manner possible. We feel that it should happen somewhere here in Dane County. Yes, it could, some people say, well, can't you do it like at a farm field 10 miles down the road? Potentially we could, but we would not do all these other things. The community, or the sustainability campus with the businesses, there's certain infrastructure you need to do that. You need access to hauling roads, internet, water, sewer to build a business park. And so that's really how we came to hone in on this site. Next slide, please. Recreation, I think we talked about this already, but there's a lot of potential opportunities for some light recreational use out here. We need to really engage in that plan, or engage with the community in that planning process. But we do fully intend for there to be recreation on this site at all phases of the site life. So over the next 50 to 100 years, continue to develop this into a real community asset, over a couple hundred acres of recreation for the community. I know also there was some concern brought up about the golf program. So we actually, as part of our agreements with the city of Madison, there will always be, for the next 25 plus years, there will always be at least 18 holes of golf at their site still. But it will actually start out with a full 36 for the first couple of years, and it drops down to 27 holes for a while, and then to 18 holes. So that is built in to continue to provide golf facilities at this site over the next 25 years. Next slide, please. This is probably, it seems a little boring, but this is probably actually fairly interesting or important for the school board here. This is about the timeline, and everything in yellow are opportunities for engagement with us and with the school board. So the top blue is the plan, or the permitting process through the city of Madison, zoning, etc. The yellow, or excuse me, the purple area is the consultant I mentioned that we're working to hire in the next month or so, that will be working over the next couple of years on the campus planning. And you see a long yellow bar there kind of starting next year, several months of engagement with the community on what that's going to include. And then the orange areas on the bottom are the DNR permitting, the state permitting process. So you see a couple of yellow dots in there where the DNR will actually put out public comment, or they'll put out their recommendations and then take public comment on their reports or their recommendations. And so those are things where the school district, as state statute states, will get a notice saying, here, this is out, you have 30 days to respond, and we'll make sure to engage with you at those points as well to make sure you know when that's coming. And then there's another yellow bar in that section that's called the local negotiated agreement process. And that's really another really strong opportunity to engage with us and with the community about this project. So that is a separate process that's spelled out in state statute. If you are building or expanding a landfill, you must engage in a negotiation with any community, so any municipality, I should say, so any village, town, city, or county that's within 1,500 feet of the boundaries of that waste facility. And in this case, most likely, that would be the City of Madison, Town of Cottage Grove, probably just those two initially. It could grow to the Village of McFarland as well. The state statute does allow, let's say, for example, it was just the town and the city, the state statute does allow other municipalities like the village to be brought into those negotiations if the city and town agree. And I know the village president has already sent letters to those other two communities asking to be included in that process, and we at the county have absolutely no problem with that. Even in a worst case scenario, if that were not to happen, we fully intend to engage with the village and the school board about what your concerns are and build that into the design. We're not intending to come in here and say, oh, sorry, you're not part of that formal process, so we can ignore everything that you would like to discuss about this site. That's not how we do business. We want to be here for decades to come, and it's important that we have a strong relationship with the community and with the school district. Also, in addition to that, I will say that those local negotiated agreement meetings are public. So they're publicly noticed. People can come to them just like this, can provide comments, can let the elected officials who may be sitting on there or who may have appointed that board, let them know what their concerns are, what their positions are, what they'd like to see included in that. The negotiated agreement process typically includes things such as hours of operation, traffic hauling routes, how we're going to handle complaints about odors or windblown litter, any potential compensation to neighbors or the community for impacts because of the landfill, things of that nature. Next slide, please.
Since you brought up the issue of odors,
Yes.
I mean, we can smell the odor now periodically. Will this increase the likelihood that there will be smells more frequently?
I think there's the potential because it is closer, absolutely. But I think realistically, we are getting a better handle on it. So I readily admit that the summer of 2017 was terrible. You know, it was terrible for your community. It was something that caught us by surprise. So we had been at this site since 1985 and we had never experienced anything like that. There was a new type of waste that was coming in and it created more hydrogen sulfide in our gas than what we typically see. And hydrogen sulfide is that rotten egg smell, which is why it's so much more noticeable. So I would argue that, you know, things have gotten much better since then. We've understood how to control that much better, how we place that waste, how we oversee and control the gas collection system. We're much more in tune to that. So we have mobile misters that we can deploy. We put a spray on product on bad days if we're detecting odors. We have weather stations at our site to help us see where the wind patterns are going if we need to increase additional efforts for that day. We have a vapor-based odor control system that goes around the perimeter of our site. That was around the north and east side, and just in the last month we've now extended it around the south side, so that should add a lot of additional protection for the village as well. All that to say is we're working on it. We're spending a tremendous amount of resources and time to make sure that we don't have impacts from odor. But I will never sit and say that you're never going to smell a landfill on any day of the year, guaranteed. Our goal is to have the least impact possible. You know, realistically, I think it's reasonable to say you may have a handful of days a year where you may notice the landfill odor. But if that happens, we need to know about it right away. We have an online reporting system now, which actually just started because of a recommendation from a community member. And so when we get those odor reports, we have staff that jump on it right away. It doesn't matter if it's Saturday at 8 AM or whatever it may be. We actually send a staff person out to that address, to the community to see what they're noticing. And we also put other staff on our own site on, okay, what's happening at our site? Do we need to adjust our gas well field? Do we need to increase our vapor misting system? What's causing this? And then how do we fix it as quickly as possible?
Just to jump on that, I mean, living in this town, it's an issue. It's more of an issue now than it was 15 years ago, for sure. There's more than a handful of days when it's warm that you smell at least some of the methane gas or the rotten egg odor. That being said, we're in this town right now. There's a lot of expansion happening out towards that landfill. And with the village expansion and then, the school owning 10 acres, very, very close to that. I mean, it's definitely a concern, given that standing on Farwell Street, sometimes you can smell it. We're gonna be a heck of a lot closer to that landfill sooner rather than later.
Yeah. No, what I would say again is, I absolutely hear what you're saying, your concerns. If you do smell odors, even if it's a faint one, please report it to us, because it lets us know that we're not doing a good enough job to stop it. And it stops it from getting worse within the community as well. At the new site, we do have some additional plans. As I mentioned, a lot of this is coming from a specific waste type. So we're looking at plans at the new site to segregate that waste in its own cell within the landfill, so it doesn't interact, and then we can cover it a lot better. We can pull on the gas collection system a lot harder in that area, and we think those things will help as well to prevent, the gases that you're really smelling from getting out.
One other question I have, so you brought up the birds when you were talking about the aviation, but obviously birds can do a lot of damage to like existing buildings and parks when they're too close to an area where it's an overpopulation of birds. What do you, considering that some of our developments are going to be relatively close to the landfill, do you do anything to negate the bird population?
Yeah, so we have some homes and businesses that are about 320 feet from the edge of our garbage right now, across AB, very close. And we work very closely with those homes and neighbors already. As an example, there's one business across the road that has called us a couple times where the flock of birds came down, and then when they left a bunch of feathers and other stuff. And so we worked with that gentleman on how can we clean up your site, but more importantly, how do we prevent it? We looked at some decoys on the roof and some other things like that. There's different things we've used over the years on our own site. There's a grape seed extract that actually acts as mace for the birds and keeps them away to some extent. So there's a lot of things you can look at. We haven't had to go to kind of too far of extremes so far, because to this point it hasn't impacted our neighbors too badly. I think there's only been 2 or 3 times where I've actually been called from a neighbor because the birds were just actually causing a nuisance at their property. But if we do get to that stage, there's really one solution that actually truly works, which is using other birds of prey like hawks or falcons out on the site to scare the birds away. And so we actually have started to explore that because we're concerned about that same problem. We've gotten quotes from 3 different falconeers, and we were thinking about doing a pilot this summer, but we'll probably do a pilot next summer to see how effective it is. And talking to my other colleagues around the nation, that's really the true fix for this. It's having someone fly a bird at your site every single day of every single year. And if it gets to that point, if this were a nuisance for the community or for those new developments, absolutely, that is what we would have to do.
Okay.
You had mentioned that 3rd grade is sort of the target area that you have come out with the tours. Do you have any plans of catching up to the 2 grade levels that did not go out during the pandemic? Because I think it's a great educational opportunity for kids.
Yeah, we would love to have them come out. If you guys are able to have your 4th, 5th, 6th graders that missed it come out with us, we would love to do that. Again, we have the school bus program, so we can pay for the buses to come. It's a totally free tour on our end, so if you can build that into your curriculum, we'd love to. I know with the grade that it traditionally has come out, it fits in really well as they're doing a unit on energy and engineering, so it's a great tie-in. But if there's other units in 4th, 5th, and 6th graders where we can have a tie-in and they can fit in their curriculum, we'd love to have them come out.
Okay.
On the screen here too, you can see on the right-hand side, we're actually having an open house on August 20th. So please make sure to share that with the community and with your folks. And it's about 3 hours. I think it's 11:30 to 4:30 or 3:30. Have folks out, and we're gonna have a live music with a DJ, food trucks out there, big equipment for the kids to climb up and explore. A little bit of interactive with our Parks Department, again, getting feedback on what people would like to see on the recreation space at this site, and then actually having tours of our landfill as well. So please make sure, if you're able to, stop out and let others know about it as well. I won't go into everything on the left-hand side, but you can see there's a lot of upcoming opportunities for engagement as well, and involvement in the permitting, the zoning, and the public engagement development plans that we have coming up over the next year or so. Next slide, please. I think that is it. Any additional questions I can help with?
I did have a couple. We've had feedback from the community that you've probably also heard about the potential health impacts of even just air quality and things like that. And you addressed a lot of it, and this was very informative. I like to call myself a tree hugger, and I really like to see a lot of what you guys are doing, so thank you for doing that. But kind of the more like low-key health impacts, there's a lot of concern in our community about that, and so can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I didn't go into a lot of this, but really the DNR oversees the entire design, permitting, construction, and operation of our landfill. And so that's built into the design and permitting in the front end, but then operation and compliance with all of our permits on the back end. And there is included in that an air permit. So that covers things like our gas plant, or before when we were running engines for electric generation, the emissions off of that. It includes the emissions, fugitive emissions from the landfill. We have to calculate those, estimate those, and report to them. But it also includes things like dust. So how much dust is leaving the site? And so we have a watering plan. We have to water multiple times a day, every single day. So there's a lot that goes into that piece of it, but also, concerns I've heard about groundwater, surface waters. There's a lot that goes in, again, the design and the permitting from their end to make sure that we don't have impacts, environmental impacts from the landfill. I've talked a lot about protection of groundwater with the liner system, the monitoring that goes on. I heard some comments recently about, what if there's runoff and it gets into the waterways? Well, just the way these systems are designed, they're designed to prevent that, right? Any water that falls within that footprint stays inside that waste footprint. Beyond that, we have surface water ponds, or stormwater ponds on the site. So if there was some sort of a catastrophic failure that allowed wastewater, or even rainwater that hit waste to go out into those ponds, there's controls built in that we can detect that, we can stop that, and then there's a whole series of testing with the DNR on how do we mitigate this now? How do we pump the water out of there? How do you dig that out? How do you make sure that there was no release to the environment? So there's a lot that goes into protecting not just the environment, but human health as well. And it's really built into the codes and the standards that the DNR will hold us to when we're designing this and when we're operating this. And it's the same that every landfill in Wisconsin has to meet for those same standards.
I thought I recall that the county bought a piece of property, corner of maybe Femrite and AB. I think there's a tavern out there now.
Yep.
Wasn't there something you were gonna build in that general vicinity there?
Yeah.
What was that?
So we've bought a few different pieces of property. We bought the tavern there.
Yeah.
And originally we were looking to build our offices there, because right now most of our administration staff is actually at the Alliant Energy Center, which isn't very ideal. So we actually hired a consultant, we designed, and we were about to build the office there, and that's when really discussions with the city got serious about the golf course, because they came out with their golf course task force the year before that recommended closing half of Hera, and that's when we said, hey, this is an opportunity to talk with them. So literally at the tail end of that design, or I should say the tail end of the economic feasibility of that office building, we realized it doesn't make sense to do that because we're probably going to be building new offices across the road. Mm-hmm. So we still own that property. We're looking at using it potentially. Right now we use it as a training center. So we do a lot of our training, larger department trainings there. That's where the open house will be as well that day. Long term, my hope is that it could potentially be a trailhead for the recreational use on the site. So if we have trails going into the boardwalks and up onto the prairie, you have a parking lot right there, a trailhead potentially. It could be a warming house for a cross-country skiing club or something of that nature. So we do own that. Across the road, across AB, we bought a couple different farms and farm fields in that area, and most of that is getting turned into a solar field. Actually, the pile driving for that has just started in the last month or so. So with that project, the county will meet its goal of being 100% renewable electricity in all of our county functions, county buildings.
So if the Hera Golf Course had not become available, what was your next plan of action to find another space for the future landfill?
Yeah, absolutely. We would have had to continue, we have been looking for sites for some time. We would have had to continue to do that and continue to narrow it down. Realistically, there's very limited, again, as I mentioned, very limited sites that meet all your setbacks, what you need, to wetlands, roads, private drinking wells, have the right geology on the site, et cetera. Most likely, it would have been a site further out in the country, and it would have been just a landfill. It wouldn't have the sustainable business park, it wouldn't have the circular economy, we wouldn't be talking about how we move our county forward and with waste management. It most likely would be just a landfill.
And then we're going backwards. And then the last question I have is, do you have an alternate electrical backup if we lose electricity?
Yeah, for our key pieces we do, for our key systems. So like our leachate pumps, our gas system flare. So if the gas system isn't working, we have a flare as a backup. But what if the flare doesn't have electricity? Then we can't destruct the gas. So the key elements, the key infrastructure, we have mobile backup generators that we can supply power.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just was gonna make a comment, just that, you know, Dane County is truly almost a national leader in what it's doing. And you hope you can continue with that and keep improving and making it even more, I guess, circular, as you want to say. It's gonna be easy for the people who want to fight this in some ways, because many of them don't know much, and I think some of the information they have is somewhat misleading. And it seems that it almost behooves you guys to really try to sell why it would be good for this area. And I don't know how exactly, I mean, you're hiring a firm, you know, to do that, because there are recreational, but there's other things as well, hopefully some economic. Because if you can do that, then I think you're there. So as much as it's a technical and engineering kind of thing, it's also very political in that sense, or economic, whatever.
Yeah,
So-
no, it's very insightful, and thank you for your comments on what we do. We often lose sight of that, you know, there's not many landfills that do all these different things we do. But to your point about the community, absolutely. It can be challenging as an engineer to sometimes hear people make comments where you just know that's not how these systems work, right? Or you know, like, that's a hazardous waste landfill from the 70s that leaked because it isn't built to the same standards ours is. So that can be challenging to fight that, or to argue against that. But you're right, we need to make sure that we're engaging more with the community and making sure that they can understand some of the positives of this. We did, prior to the main votes at the city and county board, we had 3 different sessions with the community where we, you know, I think it was over 9.5 total hours where we presented and then just took all their questions until they were done asking questions for the night. I think that helped with a good number of the community, but not all. You know, I think some people either didn't hear about some of those early sessions or weren't there. I think there's also some people that are going to, you know, be upset about this no matter what, and that's going to be a hard piece. But you're right, there's a lot of people that I think we can explain the benefits to, and they can understand that. Hopefully we can move forward, you know, with something that works for the community and for us.
Yeah, we're lucky that we have the university here as well. And, I mean, 20 years ago, the idea of using natural gas to be powering county trucks and whatnot would have been far-fetched. So, I mean, we've come a long ways, you just want to keep going with that. So.
Anybody have anything else? Any other questions or comments?
I'm better informed, so I appreciate all the information that you
I
provided
think
to
we
us.
all are.
Yeah,
I think we all are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very much so.
sorry for taking so much of your time, and I
Not
appreciate
at
the great
all.
questions, and we're always happy to come in and talk with you more. We'll let you know when opportunities are for public engagement as well.
We appreciate your coming out very much, and also appreciate the educational tours and such, and we would look forward to getting those kids that weren't able to do it.
That'd be great.
Maybe another opportunity here coming up.
We'd love that.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we need to get, moving to an update on the Village Board, School Board Planning Committee meeting. Mr. Fisher and Mr. Mooney.
Yeah, and I'll try to run through it. Tom, I would hope you, or Aaron, as far as that goes, would speak up if I leave things out. But it was really kind of exciting because the July 19th meeting, it was announced that and Jeff Mahoney's had a great deal to do with, a lot to do with this. So anyway, it turns out the village has purchased 8 acres of land. It's off of Single Cow. It is north of the Hope Rod and Gun Club, so it's right next to it. And then it's also next to the, what is it, the power,
It's sort of like a power station?
yeah, well, it's not a power station, it's substation.
That's
Substation.
Yeah.
McFarland property, it sounds like.
Right, so it's one of, no, well, it was probably,
Because we were looking at that.
Right. And so in some ways, because it's so near that substation, one of the problems with any kind of, electricity is when you send the power over a distance, you lose a certain amount of that. So it's right there, so it's perfect that way. It's also next to the gun club, which is not exactly probably choice for building and whatnot. So it's really exciting. I have talked with Jeff. It turns out, well, what's happened is basically Alliant Energy has agreed that they're going to negotiate with the village. The reason the school got involved was it turns out that 7 acres, they're going to use 7 acres of the 8, they're going to produce more electricity than the village could actually use. And so the only way they could do it is if they would include this district as well. And that's part of the problem, because you can produce electricity and sell it to your own, I guess, your municipality. But when you start bringing in another governmental agency or whatnot, at that point, then you have to actually basically let the utility actually kind of sell it back to you. So we would produce it, we'd send it to them, they in turn would actually then be selling it to us. And we're in the process right now, and Jeff has talked to me about it, it's the negotiations. And they're not going as well as you'd like. And part of it is just simply the laws that we have for our utilities regulating them are outdated. And some states have actually kind of gotten ahead where they're literally allowing people to sell their own electricity that they produce. The state of Wisconsin, we haven't gotten there, so it's going to be dicey right now, trying to figure out how that's going to work. But they're trying to negotiate a 20-year contract, and they would be in charge of all the upkeep and whatnot. They would produce, or they would put down and pay for all of the solar panels and
Okay.
whatnot.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is it would produce enough electricity for the entire village and the entire school district, minus the Wabeesa Intermediate School. And I think that area in the village is actually run by MG&E. So
That's, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
That's kind of a confusing issue
Yeah.
over there, and we need Arlen Halverson in here to explain exactly
Right.
how that
Right.
works probably, or Jeff.
But it offers, such potential if we can actually just work the negotiation out. And Jeff is very much involved with those right now.
Okay.
He's saying things are not looking as good as they should, but we'll see how that works out. So that was the first thing we talked about. We looked at the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI work, and really the big thing there is we mentioned about Ann just getting, again, another contract from us. The youth center, that's one of the things that the village and the school district, we both contribute to the resources to that. Jamie Thomas is a new member of that. We looked at community recreation. We know a lot more now about baseball and softball. There was the affordable housing. It's something that we're looking at as sharing. Again, the Taylor Road site has just come in. There's the Holcher Road is under construction. We talked about the school resource officer, and Joel Ziesma has been assigned to that. And then some of the things that we had looked at, kind of brainstorming early on, with the idea of local journalism, communication technology, and trying to work together that way between the village, sharing or working with the district. And then trying to work it out so that we can get more students on some of the committees that the village has. So that's kind of where we are with that. And I don't know if, Tom, you want to add anything? Or-
That was a great summary.
Sounds like a good meeting.
Included everything.
It was good,
Holy
but
cow.
it was a little discouraged. after
Well, that
talking,
happens.
Whereas we're going through negotiation. Now we get to playing the game, so I don't know if.
Was that a piece of the McFarland property that at one
Yes.
point in time we were looking at possibly purchasing?
Okay.
Yes. I think that the big thing for everybody to realize when you are talking about solar and doing that, which is wonderful, when you talk about that it could power the school district and the village's electrical, it doesn't take away necessarily the expense.
No.
It's taking,
It's not free.
it's taking the equivalent of what we take on or use off the grid of, from other non-renewable energies. And then there is some potential financial gain for the entities that help move that forward. So,
Right, and there's gonna be the need for, you know, the non-renewables when you have those peak times and whatnot. That's gonna continue. But it should, I mean, there's the potential to bring down.
yeah, that solar field would go into the grid
Right.
for the whole
area.
area.
There's a
It doesn't-
couple of
it
solar
doesn't
fields right
directly-
out that area.
But what it is it's taking a considerable, I think we're talking one megawatt, which is a bazillion watts. So again, we have to make sure that we're upfront, that this isn't, a lot of people think it's a budget solve. It's not a budget solve. It's a shift in how we get energy that's more sustainable for all involved. So,
Is it essentially, basically like offsetting a carbon footprint?
yes,
Okay.
yep. We would be eliminating the carbon footprint for the village of McFarland and the school district of McFarland.
Minus
Minus-
that, what we say.
But we're looking at the options with that.
Okay.
Anything else? Moving on to CESA 2 Annual Convention. Mr. Mooney, the floor is
Okay.
yours.
Yes, thanks. I'm the rep on the board for the CESA 2 convention. It's held annually at Whitewater. I was unable to make it because I was suffering from COVID, but I do have information about it. And just as a little background information, CESA 2 covers the geographical boundaries of, like, from Wisconsin Heights to Beloit to Lake Geneva into Union Grove and everything inside those boundaries. It consists of 49 school districts and 6 unified high school districts. And CESA is divided into 11 clusters. McFarland belongs to Cluster C, which consists of McFarland, Deerfield, Monona Grove, and Madison. Each cluster can vote to have one of the 4 reps serve on the Board of Control, sort of like the school board, sort of like that, and they meet monthly. And the person from Deerfield, who is the rep for this year. The topic in June was the 2022 cyber insurance landscape. And they forwarded the slideshow to me. It was a wonderful slideshow. But Jeff, are you presenting our cyber plan in September here? So we'll look forward to that, see what's happening with that. And that's about it for CESA 2.
Any questions? Virtual School Summit.
Virtual
Staying with
Schools-
Mr. Mooney.
Yes, Summit. Again, being the board rep on the WEDO board, the board members were invited to attend their annual summit. It was in Washington DC this past week for a day and a half. And again, the 4 words I would use to describe my experience sitting in those meetings would be educational and eye-opening. I mean, I think a lot of people, there's a misconception of what virtual school is. We have limited knowledge of it because our kids went through some virtual learning the past year and a half or 2 years, but it's well beyond that with WEVA and the other virtual academies. The goal is to give all students the opportunity to succeed and graduate, just like we do with our kids, and options lead to success. They have a whole host of options, and they may have greater options than we do in the brick and mortar building because it's virtual. The outcomes of the summit was 2 things: align the leadership and their partners. Their partners included the executive directors, and Sarah Cutler is the executive director here in McFarland. I'll just add, I think she's been in that position maybe for, I don't know, 11 or 13 months. She is dynamite. I mean, I was on the board 2 years ago, and she has taken the WEVA school here so much further than what it was before. And it was going good guns before.
Yeah.
But just her background, her knowledge, her enthusiasm, her motivation, her ability to connect with people, I mean, it's really outstanding. And secondly, highlighting successes, challenges, opportunities. You know, coming together, what's working, what's not working in the virtual world. There were 4 sectionals, and this is sort of the business piece. Customer experience. You know, what can they do to provide the experience and opportunities for families, students who first enroll, and the retaining student retention, because that can be very challenging at times. Secondly, national local marketing. They showed a commercial that they just produced. It was like a 20-second commercial, and the first time it was with a script, audible script, and it talked about, you know, you want your child to be riding the school bus 2 hours a day, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, carrying a 20-pound backpack, being bullied in school, all this stuff. Okay. Then they ran the same commercial with no script, only the ad at the end. You know, consider virtual schools, K-12 virtual schools. The feedback from the participants was really interesting. Like some of the principals also oversee their virtual academies. It was quite critical of the brick and mortar buildings. Sure, some of that goes on, but that's not the typical life of a child in the public schools. So they're going to go back and take a look at that. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want them to criticize us, and we don't want to criticize them also. Everyone has a niche in the educational field. And what virtual K-12 wants to do is find the best fit possible. Might be with them, might be in the more brick and mortar schools. Career learning, adult learning, they're expanding to post-high school now. They've partnering with Southern Massachusetts, what is it? Oh, Southern New Hampshire University, virtually.
That's a community college, I assume.
I think it's a 4-year college.
Is it 4-year?
But-
I see commercials.
Yeah, you see the, and it's all
I think it's
virtual.
4-year.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the bus that goes around, so they can hand some people their diploma in real life. You'll see that. But again, their concentration is on career and readiness programs, work-based, learning project-based, and adult learning via enrichment programs. So they're really expanding beyond just the K-12. And then the professional development is where we have an opportunity to learn from virtual folks. The virtual schools have a lot to learn from us. And together, we feel there's a niche for both of us to do even further collaboration in the area of sharing resources, materials, professional development, job shadowing, just so that we have a better understanding of what our colleagues in a different setting, what their world looks like. And to actually observe students, to see how they engage them. And we would invite them to come into our brick and mortar schools also.
It's certainly 2 different disciplines. You
It
know,
is.
Teaching virtually and teaching brick and mortar are
Yep.
2 different animals for
Mhm.
sure, and I think we found that out in spades
Yes.
over the last year and a half.
And one of the opportunities is for brick and mortar staff to see how they're doing it. Because what they're doing is far different than what we did,
Yep.
because our curriculums are vastly different. And again, everything that they do is centered around their state's standards. So, yeah, they're working under some of the same restraints that we are. But one of the fascinating things is they call it gamification. Have you heard of that? I never heard of it. It's where they use video games for the learning. They have competitions like with Fortnite, League of Legends, chess, Rocket League, Smash Fall Guys. Now, some of you guys with kids might know what those are. I have no idea. But what they've done is that they use those games, and it's called gamification, to draw the kids' interest. And again, they're tied to standards. So they're actually learning without realizing it sometimes. But they have esports at the varsity and junior varsity level. They have competitions. They have the spelling bee, they have art competition, photography contest, a national cook-off, and innovation contest, to name a few. So they provide a whole host of different types of extracurricular. And they consider that addressing some of the mental health issues that might be out there with socialization. It's just a different way to look at it. And then they have work-based learning approach to careers, which sort of parallels to what we do, I think. Maybe it's a little more specific. At the K-5 level, it's career awareness, which we're all aware of. At the 6-8 level, it's career exploration. At the 9-11 level, it's career preparation. And then at grade 12, it's career training, where they really get right into it. Future careers that they're focusing in on are career skills certification for students, employment readiness certification, and employment ready advanced certification. And certainly, one of the goals of the Virtual Academy and WEVA in particular is what they call the CRE, the Credit Recovery Equivalent, and it's done via the project-based learning. And some of the research out there is very positive, trying to catch these kids up so they can graduate. And the closing tidbit that I have, of all the counties in Wisconsin, there's only one that does not have at least one student in WEVA.
I knew they were all over the state.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Yeah, they bring kids in from all over.
So that concludes this report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mooney. Any questions, comments? Moving on, we have Superintendent Tarnitzer with an update on the strategic planning process.
Yes, so the invites to participate in the listening sessions and the committee went out. First time creating a flyer, tell me it's pretty.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. It was exciting. Angie got to hear some of that excitement from me. Working on my graphic design abilities. So far, we've had 19 people express interest. Exciting to share that of that group, we've had 4 students express interest, which it's a summer, right? So that's pretty good. That means they're checking their school email or some of the social media outlets. Yeah, they're paying attention. So just so you know, kind of the behind the scenes of it a little bit, is that in addition to sending out this information, what I'll do is then see who responds and then who hasn't responded. So one of the questions on that form is, who else do you think we should reach out to? And so I want to see who naturally volunteers, who happens to see it, and steps forward and acknowledge those people. So I don't want to start recruiting too early, but then there's weeks built in specific for recruitment and adding to the committee to see that. So far had a nice response. I'm sure that we'll have more staff responding as well. It did so happen, not accidentally, that the planning committee meetings, they're both on days off of school. One is a professional development day, one is a conference release day. So it works out. I think it'll make it a little easier for staff to be able to participate without us having to have guest
That'd be great.
teacher coverage.
Or where they have to plan
Yeah.
during their absence.
Right. So hopeful that we'll have that, but we want to have a balanced group. Obviously, we don't want to overwhelm them with the committee with staff, but we want to make sure staff are represented and continue to have our underserved and often underrepresented population as well.
It was nice
Okay.
that you mentioned that at the joint school district village board meeting. That was at the very end, and I think that was a great way to kind of almost kick it off. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Okay? school board retreat agenda items.
Yes, so thank you for sharing your wisdom. I sent this to you today, but I don't, expect you to be on your school email during the day, but have this to share with you. So what I did
I got it.
was, I took all the topics and made sure to register your votes. Again, now this, it's votes I use, as a joke. You didn't vote, but you expressed your interest in what your priorities are. But it's up for us to discuss. I mean, it's not something we vote on, and we're just gonna kind of help guide, ultimately, the agenda that we'll set for the 17th in terms of priority areas. One of the things we need to be mindful, and some of you actually added comments about that, is just let's, make sure that we can adequately address the topics that we do discuss and not set ourselves up with too many topics. One of the things I did, and, again, take it for what it's worth, was I put an asterisk by some of those that I felt like these are topics we could probably address through, a regular school board meeting possibly, or through the McFarland minutes. They're just kind of, some of them were just like really good questions, as much as anything. But, it's important for us to think about, we've got this time together on the 17th, what do we want to focus on and prioritize?
And 2 hours will go by like 20 minutes.
Yes.
So things have to be kind of concise in order to get everything done and it rarely gets done in a couple of hours, but it hasn't, I don't think it's taken 3, so.
But thanks for explaining about the asterisk one. That's really neat.
Yeah, and again, we could talk about one of those topics at the retreat. It's not to say that we couldn't. And then on the back, just to show you my results, I'm not, citing my sources there, so you can see.
Well, for the visual learners, it's great.
Yes,
That's right.
it makes it easy when you're going
Yeah.
through, so. So whatever, it's up for your discussion now about any of the topics that you see that you want to make sure we really focus on the 17th.
I think it would be helpful if, those 4 that you have in bold, if we have an idea of what type of outcome we're looking for. Either an action outcome or a planning outcome, so we don't spend, 2 hours on just one, just circulating it, cycling in and out of it.
I agree with that.
Yeah, it seems like some of those topics are about information gathering, kind of sharing, less necessarily that there'll be, something that the board will do, but maybe something more so for me to follow up on, or.
Well, for example, that number 1 area, employee morale. Yeah, I think we all have heard from staff, periodically, and it does impact their morale, or they might share things. I would find it useful if we just spent a few minutes, what have we heard,
Right.
from school staff?
Yeah.
We don't even have to mention names, maybe building levels, I don't know. But just to get sort of a baseline.
Yep.
We do have the information from the staff survey that was administered 2 years ago this past spring. I don't know if anyone else has, well, you probably have that information. There was a lot of information, and one of the criticisms that the board receives is, we sent that information, but nothing was ever done with that. When in fact, I think sometimes things do get done with it, but they just don't hear about
They
it,
don't get marketed. Yeah.
But I don't know, before I
That's,
went.
that's shame on us, though. If
Oh,
that's-
sure.
If that's the
Yeah,
case, then
it
it's our
is.
fault. So we need to fix it.
So,
On a couple of topics, they relate very well together. So in a way, you can almost cluster them as seen together. So that's gonna.
I agree,
hopefully-
so like employee morale and even time task force kind of go hand in hand,
Yeah.
right? Because we're talking
All
about
workload and
workload and how to,
responsibilities.
yeah.
But also the exit interview is gonna give you information about morale. So
Mhm.
they're all connected. That's
Yeah.
just fun. Good.
But I agree, I mean, I don't wanna talk about too many things, or we don't have time to focus on the
Right.
big things.
I'm just excited to have the time.
Well,
It'll be fun.
and if after we get through with this one, we feel like there's enough left over to have another one, we can have another one. There's nothing that says we can't. You know, I think we all wanna address the issues that need to be addressed, and we'll take whatever time we need, I think, to make sure that happens.
So are you saying that the 4 that are bolded are the ones that are being placed on the agenda that we're notifying to the public, or can some of these other topics be discussed
Yeah.
during the retreat?
I'm not saying that we need to talk about those 4, I just put them in bold because they did have the highest response rate. So,
Okay,
yeah, it's just to guide the discussion, but it's not a decision.
okay.
Could I make one suggestion when it comes to
Yeah, please.
employee morale? If we could spend a few minutes just conversing with each other, what have we heard? The good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, what do we know?
We have data that we can refer back to
Mm-hmm.
by, take a look at the exit surveys and the former staff survey. We can't do it that night, we don't have to do it during the board retreat,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe some of us would be willing to go back into that data,
Mhm.
take a look. Because I think the data that we're gonna share, the conversation we had, is about present comments from staff
Mm-hmm.
in the past year probably, but not historical issues.
Well, and I think, the board listening session information that was
Yeah.
gathered, in the past year.
See, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, we had board listening sessions, and I think that it's really important to go back to some of the comments. And I think a lot of these topics, even the ones that aren't bolded, still, the employee morale kind of focuses on that, and the comments we got from those listening sessions can help to
Mm-hmm.
add some discussion.
Or maybe that would be for the retreat, someone could summarize the
I
listening
think-
sessions, is this from
yeah.
last year?
So yes, and,
Yeah.
and
Yes,
we
I-
do
like I said, I
have
don't have-
summaries, maybe, Angie, do you have the summaries of the board listening sessions? Because I know.
think I have them, and I took
You
notes
have
on
them?
them. too.
Okay, because I know Dr. Anderson had
Yep, yep.
typed up some summaries.
We do for the first one, but
Did we have any others?
not for the second.
Okay.
And this is the issue that I have, is that we all have different levels of understanding and
Yeah.
knowledge, but we're all functioning as one team.
Mm-hmm.
So it behooves us to have the same amount of information. So as new board members come on, it'd be helpful if, like, Meg and I had received some of those survey results.
Agreed,
Mhm.
agreed. Anything else on that? Otherwise, we'll move to the district administrator's report.
Oh, but what about these other things, Craig?
Oh, what do we have?
Communication, exit interviews, time task force?
Oh, talking about the,
The priorities for priority areas.
right.
So I think the exit interview analysis is important. I know that it hasn't been, well, this year we were doing it, right, but with COVID and everything, exit interviews weren't being completed, were they, or were they being completed? They still were?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But the question is, were they shared at the board level? Because when I was on the board the first time, I don't remember getting any results.
We did get the ones from 2020
After I
and
asked for
21.
'em.
Yeah, I
Right.
think so.
Mhm.
And then I did ask if the most current ones were available, but I haven't checked my
I
email
suspect
yet.
it'll
they
be-
probably
You
aren't
said it
available yet.
Yeah.
Looked like early fall. You want
Okay.
to get
Okay.
But,
rid of that.
but that's another thing we should be talking about, because the return rate is so poor
Mhm.
with teacher exit surveys. You know, what can we do to bolster that?
Mhm.
Yeah, or maybe there's a better way of doing it. You know, sitting down with the staff before they leave, I don't know. But,
Mm-hmm.
And I do think, like, that standard-based grading, vision versus reality, falls into employee morale, time, communication. So I think that can be a part of all of this, but definitely from some of the listening sessions, we heard a lot about that as well.
Oh,
Mm,
Yeah.
Interesting.
yes.
yeah, I'm the one that put the time task force on. If it's okay with the board, why don't I come prepared just to share a little history on that?
Sure.
no action has to be taken at that point, you know.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think virtually everything here ties back into employee morale.
And time.
Oh, well,
I
for
think,
sure,
yeah.
and we know full well that we've had an extraordinary last couple of years, and, you know, the way that you evaluate performance can't be the same, you know, as it would have been pre-COVID or pre-pandemic probably, and there are a lot of, I think, issues that pop up when you're in the middle of something you had no way of anticipating, and different people react different way to those sorts of situations. The COVID, the pandemic period, I think is a tough time to put too much stock into judging someone's performance, maybe. Or at least you have to understand, keeping in mind, you know, the different circumstance that these people faced that no one had ever faced before. So we just kind of have to temper things, I think, now and again.
If I could, well, and this is kind of my vision for this, if we're discussing these topics, like, you know, we talk about the issues, we kind of formulate some action plans on how to move forward. I feel like as a board, we need to talk about these things, but we also need some accountability. How is this information being reported back to us? What changes need to be made? And so, to me, some of these topics, I foresee us actually discussing it and having some action plans of next steps versus just discussing it to discuss it.
Hmm?
So that would be kind of,
Right. I mean, I would not advocate just for discussion purposes.
yeah.
There has to be an action
There
plan.
has to be some kind of action plan.
Even
and
if it's
some
not doing
accountability.
anything.
Yeah, because I think a lot of these things we discuss a lot, and then it kind of, we don't hear much else about it. And I want to make sure that we're moving forward.
And that's the
with some of this.
frustrating part too, Kate. Yeah, we do talk about things, we think things are in motion, but we never get that feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things are probably going on behind the scenes, but we aren't aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We do have a new superintendent
Yes.
who is, that's me,
Okay.
who's, you know, who is very committed to, once we say we're gonna do something, to follow up. And that's
Okay.
part of my commitment, is to communicate back to you about, you know, what is being done. We talked about this, what is being done, so that'll be an important thing. And I think through the discussion at the retreat, one of the things we'll talk about is what we know, but we'll also talk about what we don't know. And how could we find out what we don't
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, you know, somebody stopping us at Pick and Save or coming to a listening session, they are speaking for themselves, you know?
Right.
Are there people we're not hearing from? You know, and how do we engage all of our staff? And, because there may be some people that, you know, have wonderful things to share or not wonderful things to share that would be helpful to know, but they're not somebody that feels comfortable, you know, approaching one of us.
Right.
You know.
There are plenty of those folks out there.
Yeah, so,
They need to have, we need to figure out a way to mine their issues as well.
yeah.
Because there was a lot of discomfort at a couple of those listening sessions.
Was this last year, Craig?
Yeah, did a couple of them.
Yeah.
And it didn't, I don't think it turned out as well as anybody had hoped.
Mhm.
It's just a difficult thing to pull off.
See, but I would disagree. You know, I think it can be pulled off. I think you have to have the players in the room that are active listeners, that are open to different ideas. And if everyone does that, then some of that other stuff
And
goes
some-
away, but.
Some ground rules were put in place that made it very difficult,
Oh,
I think,
okay,
to make it a fruitful
okay.
discussion.
Mm.
Sometimes it's helpful just ventilating.
Yep, exactly,
That's
and
human
that's the
nature.
approach that
That's
I
human
took.
nature, exactly.
I said, we'll have representatives there, and you come in and you talk to us about anything you want to talk about.
But I do think it's important, we look at the things and we try to find as much information as we can.
Yep.
And if there is something that we need to be concerned about, then let's start working towards it.
I think if you gather information, it's your responsibility to do something.
Exactly.
You know, even if it's tabled and move out, that's, at least you're paying attention.
Yeah.
Well, based on that, Craig, we can pull the results from the spring 2019
Sure.
teacher survey
Sure.
and just go down and say, okay, these have been accomplished, these weren't addressed, or whatever.
I think so. Anything else on the retreat? If not, we'll move on. Mr. Tarnitzer?
Yes.
District Administrator's Report.
Yes, thank you. Don't know if you caught a little bit of recognition about the Forward Unified. I did not realize about this,
Oh,
thanks,
yes.
about social media. So we have 5 high school students that volunteered with the Special Olympics. Did you hear about this? With
Yes.
the-
I
The
don't
soccer?
believe I did.
Yep.
I did.
So this summer, yeah, so playing on the soccer team, so they signed, I like how we quoted that, with
Oh, I,
Forward Madison to play.
now I know. Yeah.
And yeah, so they played at Bree Stevens, after Nebraska played, they played them. I say that to my wife, who's an alum and a Husker through and through. And then they're traveling to Nebraska on August 31st to play.
Yeah.
So just wanted to give some recognition to Stella Blau, Cole Larson, Jacob Sturtz, Rowan Wagner, and Avery Weaver for
Really
engaging
neat.
in that with the Special Olympics. A unique thing. Some upcoming things. Did you know? For whatever reason, I don't know the history, but August is National Truancy Prevention Month. And you know what isn't that odd? I don't know. It's a fun fact. And I thought it was kind of interesting because I think of my days as a school administrator. That is one of the things that we would do in August is reach out to the kids and the families that struggled with attendance in the previous year and let them know how excited we are to have them come. We're excited and can't wait to have them come back because sometimes that is a hard transition coming back. But for whatever reason, it's Truancy Prevention Month. I guess you should prevent it before it happens.
True.
Gotta be thinking about it first.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's right, have a plan. But really proud of the work that we do, and especially shout out to my colleagues who are school social workers, as they often lead that work with the associate principals. This one makes sense. Get ready for kindergarten month. August is that. And I really, Camp Kindergarten is a wonderful tradition, important here. And, you know, it was important. I wanted to be there on that first day just to see that, you know, and to have that school year where I get to see the bookends. That's one of the great things about my new role is being able to see the kids nervously as they come. And they were a little nervous. Not too bad, though. Not what I expected. Not the tears I expected. At least not from the students. And then, there you go.
I've heard all about it from a couple kids that
Did
came
you?
in. Oh, they were all so excited about Camp Kindergarten. They got a whole rundown from 3 or 4 of them. So,
Well, yeah.
sounds like it went well.
Yeah, and that speaks to our amazing staff.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, I get middle school. I am so excited to learn from our EC through 2 colleagues. What a great service. Well organized, you know, thanks to Greg and Brooke and Jess for organizing that, but the
They
teachers.
do a great job with that.
Those teachers, my
It's
goodness.
fantastic.
And I think, you know, the 4K teachers really prime the kids
Yes.
for Camp Kindergarten, and it really has resulted in the level of comfort, I think the
Yeah.
level of success as these kids experience their 5K
I'm
year.
so glad you brought that up because that is something I think we can celebrate a little bit more is our partnership
Yeah,
with our
I
4K
think so.
partners. That's something that we don't often talk about at
It's been
this
great
level.
since day one.
Yep.
That
Just
program
been
has been.
incredible since the
Yep.
very first day that we did that.
Yeah,
That
really
program.
great people. Great partnerships. August 9th is National Book Lovers Day, so make sure that you
Okay.
celebrate reading. Oh, that was funny. Tomorrow's a big day for us, administrative-wise. We have our beginning of the year kickoff for our administrative council. We used to call it a retreat, but unless we're going somewhere and there's, a spa involved, I'm not calling it a retreat.
Food and beverage, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. We are gonna have lunch, about the upcoming, school board meetings, we'll talk about, Neola a little bit on the 15th, and the 17th is our retreat. One of the things that you'll see in the minutes, the McFarland minutes this week, but just wanna key you in, is August 23rd is our new staff orientation.
Yep.
And board members are invited to come. Typically, the president speaks at the welcome, which is from 7:45 to 8:30.
It's a really neat thing to do
Yeah, well,
if you
Lisa.
if you can get over there.
And you don't need to make a speech. You're welcome to. You can just wave. It will be
you will be
noticed,
introduced.
so, yeah. So we can have a quorum there. Angie will do a great job noticing that. And then after, at the end of the day, from 3 to 4:30, they gather at Angelo's for
Right.
just a little more informal, casual gathering there. And you're welcome to stop by and say hi, but please don't feel obligated, but just wanted to extend that to you. Craig does feel obligated because the board president will speak at the welcome. You are obligated.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
So that's my update.
All right.
This month.
Business manager's report, I think, is next on the agenda.
Wonderful.
Thank you for staying around, Mr. Mahoney. We appreciate it very much.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
hand out just a couple documents.
thank
As I've
you.
been doing. Now, the last several times we've been talking really about like big vision, 5 years out, limiting state revenues or state revenues.
Everything.
Keep the word plummeting out of the
Yeah.
report, okay?
I'm gonna just have to, this piece of paper is really gonna be something that we're gonna kind of mindfully move through.
Okay.
These are the type of columns, again, that you'll see as we develop our annual meeting, and are noticing that in September, we'll actually have the board take action on a posting for our annual meeting, which occurs in October. And, the great thing here is I can tell you, and it sounds weird for me to just leave it this way, but the great thing is that I've been looking back at, July and June and May and those other reports. I'm still stuck on this about 1.5 million. That's the gap that I'm gonna say again, our legislators have really left us with. Because that is the amount of money we'll need from one-time funds that are federal funds, that the next time you see this document, it'll have a balanced budget. Because I will now insert in about $1.5 million worth of federal funds for the 22-23 year, out of about $4.5 million worth of federal funds that we can use this year and next fiscal year. Now, that's a Band-Aid, because as you know, at some point, we can't use those federal funds, and therefore, we either continue to use, as I stated, all of them and build some of our own reserves so that later on, we're easing into potentially a referendum. But I did say I wasn't gonna get past 22-23, because ultimately, and lately with my reports for annual meetings, I've really focused on the big picture of what's occurring from students right down to taxes. And I'd like to shift to that. One more comment about this page. The two highlighted yellow, the piece I wanted to point out, and this is we should be proud of the fact that we do have a lot of opportunities in special education to provide a lot of services for a lot of students. But one of the significant increases of about $6.8 million budget is the fact that was last year, 21-22. Moving forward, we're looking at $7.4 million for that fund. It's mostly due to the fact that we continue to have more one-on-one aids. We do have more significant situations that we have to provide that. And gathering talent to come and work in our school district is a competition. So the cost for our EAs in special education has risen. Our cost for pupil services in special education has risen. It's not just us, it's the school districts around us, our staff. You know, we have a situation just even today where we have a candidate that also Verona's interviewing. And you get into, you know, I hate to say it, refer back to that Oakland Hayes movie, Moneyball. But that's what, you know, was created back in, with Act 11. So we continue to do well, but those are the pressures that I believe our legislators are not seeing, is the fact that they're not providing any new revenues, but we have incredibly increasing expenses that, you know, that's where at some point, similar to other school districts in Dane County and across the state are going out for referendums. We're gonna be no different unless for some reason in the next biennial budget that gets fixed. But I think we're in a great opportunity, as I can show from this next document, which is a lot of people at the annual meeting would just wish I'd put up the property tax bill and the board could vote and we could be done in about 30 seconds.
Right.
Or the community could vote in 30 seconds. But I'd like to kind of get to that snapshot of what that looks like for, as we develop the final chapters of that information in September, with voting in October.
Jeff, do we have a date for the annual meeting?
Yes, we do. It's
24th? 24th? Thanks.
Thank you.
So this document, again, don't want to scare you, it's got a lot of information. But it is part of a picture of what we'll probably be having to tell our story with regards to, in the future, an annual meeting. And then after that, and I'm getting used to these readers. So what I wanted to start with is student count. Now this is the revenue cap student count. When we work from left to right, that's the number of FTE, resident FTE students in our district. And I'd like to point that out, that, you know, 12, 13, we're at 2,011 students, FTE. We're looking at 2,287, which is 13.72% growth. It's an average of 1.3% enrollment growth for revenue cap purposes. The rest of our enrollment comes from open enrollment, which we've capped over the years. So similarly, when you, and I'm going to bounce back to the student count of 13.72% over that 10-year snapshot when I talked about equalized value, because there's an important correlation there. But our revenue cap, which controls over 90% of our revenues, starts with how many kids you have, you get a certain dollar amount per kid, and it's a cap unless the legislature gives us inflationary adjustments, which they didn't do last year or this fiscal year. So if you look from left to right, and you go all the way to the orange, you'll see that our revenue cap is $27 million. Now that is 0.1% growth. Okay, everybody's getting used to the glasses on Jeff, but I'm the one struggling with this at the moment. So revenue cap minus state aid, which is that next piece there, $13.3 million. That's what we're estimating. That has risen 45% since 2012-13, or on average about 3.88%. Now, when you take the revenue cap, 27 million minus 13 million, we're well funded in the school district formulas in Dane County when we compare to our neighbors. We are 50% basically funded by the state, and then the property taxpayers. But if you'll notice, we're looking at, just for our general fund purposes, a levy of 13,375,000. It's about a 1% decrease from last year. So, property taxes for general fund, that's the general education that supports that first piece of paper I gave you. That's what supports general education and special education. Now, obviously, there's some other taxes, but those are planned out through either referendums for the debt service fund, which this coming year is 4.3 million. Our capital fund actually comes out of a revenue cap, that's 249,000. And our community service fund is $432,000. So our total property tax levy for projected at this point is 18.3, about 18.4 million, which is a 0.2% increase over last year. Now, when you look at where it was in 12-13, it's only a 29% change. That's 2.9% change over 10 years on average each year. Now, the big piece is, how does that get to the homeowner? Well, equalization value, all the value of the whole school district combined, is how it's divvied out. So if I have $500,000 home, I take that percent, or that amount divided by the 1.8 billion, and I get a percentage of this budget, or this property taxes. Well, that leads to a mill rate then. So we're looking at $10.04 per $1,000 for educational purposes. Remember, on a tax bill, there's municipal, county, and technical schools, and sometimes special districts. So, but this is a 22% decrease from 10 years ago. We are certainly at a point where education, when you look at how much state equalization aid has been put in the formulas, I mean, we can at least say that the state has been putting more money into offsetting property taxes. The report I heard most recently, Wisconsin's at like the 27th or 28th state in spending 2 years ago per student. We're likely to hit the mid-30s. We're the only state in the United States that's made a double and almost a 10, if not 20 place move down in spending per student in the United States. We're not in that top 5 anymore. We haven't been for 10 years. But we're well past the top 5. I mean, we've tumbled. So there's always options for our state legislators, but more importantly, our local economy in McFarland has really thrived on the fact that when you look at the equalized value of our school district, 65% growth in 10 years of equalized value. And when people talk about what are you going to do with all those students that are filling your buildings, we have to remember we've only had 13%, 14% growth in enrollment. So we do have a tax base out there that has grown that could likely support a positive referendum in a few years to keep our operational moving, simply by the numbers. Now, there's a lot more work than just me just saying, well, you can afford it. That's
Do you have any idea who's going out this year?
yes. Wanakee is going to have a vote on it, the second meeting in August. Middleton is going out already. Oregon. There'll be basically half the county will be going out.
These are all operational referendums?
All operational. You know, we would be further along with this if we didn't have the virtual school,
Yep.
which we're using this year to the tune of $1 million. We also have federal funds that we did not have given to us in the first 2 years, so we didn't expand a lot of areas. Well, That's a benefit,
Yep.
but fiscal cliffs are not going away.
Gotcha.
Because some districts use those funds to create things programming that they now have to sustain.
So some great news for our property taxpayers for sure this year, potentially the following year, that, property taxes kind of continue to go down for taxpayers, for school purposes.
And that's the unfortunate piece, is that when I hear about it, I just hear about the school property tax, until we inform them better that it includes all these other things.
So what, and you can blame this on my newness, but so obviously the long-term fix is lobbying the legislators, right? So what, is there anything we can do to help support that? Or how do we do that from a board level?
It's a great question. Certainly, things that we can do, in particular, maybe as we get into October or November or December, we can discuss how we can help send resolutions to our state legislators to advocate for better funding or increased funding, or the ability for a board to make decisions about funding, even if that coincides with referendums of some sort.
Mhm.
So I think that's the level that we can migrate through. If I'm continue to be allowed to, I'm on the School Administrators Alliance, which is a lobbying group for our administrative teams across the state. I'm a board member on that. I also serve on the board of directors for WASBO, which is business directors of the state. I have one more year on that. So a lot of times my energies are spent on those boards with the collective group advocating. We are taking new directions with some of those. For instance, WASBO, our statewide business managers organization, just hired a fiscal analyst that's going to prepare more data so we can get more statewide data out to our legislators. And something I've been advocating for is that our realtors boards, our associations, hospital associations, road builders associations, those groups really need to know what's impacting, because when we talk about enrollment here, think about the fact that we have all of this development and we're barely filling our own buildings.
Right.
Well, Dane County is a hot market for people to
Yeah.
move to.
Mm-hmm.
You go north of Highway 8 and the out-migration and the death migration is, those towns are starting to dry up, which means services aren't there. I mean, fire stations, EMS can't support because they don't have people that are young enough to go do that stuff. So, anyways, as long as I'm continue to be allowed to, attend these organizations, be on board as a representative from McFarland, I'll be continuing to advocate at that level.
There was a wonderful editorial in yesterday's Wisconsin State Journal where the mayor of Milwaukee
Yep.
and the mayor of Tomahawk
Mm-hmm.
talked about how we got to change how we're funding. You were over-relying in some ways on the property tax.
Couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
In terms of needs and.
And I think we're gonna have to start doing perhaps a better job, or at least being more open about things that we can provide to the public, that 2/3 or 3/4 that don't have children in schools.
Right.
There's a lot we can do and are doing, and that's why I really like being on that committee. And you're right, it's not a fix with the solar, but it's an opportunity. And, we just need to kind of show the public that it's money worth spending.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be the challenge.
We've also had local representatives come to the board meetings. So that might be something that we take a look at.
Fortunately and unfortunately, fortunately for us, all of our local legislators have been
Yeah.
pounding the pavement to try to get
Yep.
better funding. And we don't necessarily have access to those that are outside of
The others.
our districts.
But that's why it's so important
Right.
that you get involved with that statewide and start saying, look, this is not just Dane County, this is affecting everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other questions for
No,
Jeff
this is-
on the budget update?
Very sobering.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mahoney. As always, superb work. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Keep us open. Don't let them close us. Okay? That's just between now and the next meeting. Let's get some work going on.
Quote,
Keep
unquote,
it the
end of
district
this.
open.
Keep the lights on.
All right, so we'll move on here. We've got an action item. Action on the 2021-2022 budget changes. Administration recommends approval of the attached budget changes for the 2021-2022 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Kate, any other discussion?
I think I hit, since I don't have access to my computer, I don't know that I fully remember my question here, but it looked like for the most part, there was this, like, the second part of it was mostly a reallocation of funds. And so is that something we do typically every year at this time, or was there some special circumstances that?
So you'll see that, or the revenues that we indicated had the majority changes, which usually then has corresponding expenditure. Up top, it's items 630, or sources 630, 730, and 780. Those are all special grants. So our allocations have to match in the budget, and then we have to shift around so that we're within a certain percentage level on the expenditure side. So
Okay.
this is very typical for each July, August,
Got
to
it.
have this done before we hit our auditor season, which is 2 weeks.
Wow.
So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
Good question.
It's a great question.
Auditor season is fun.
It is.
Anything else? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I would look for a motion for adjournment.
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you. Megan?
I'll
Do I have a
second.
Anybody?
I'll second.
Kate? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned at, 9 o'clock.
Perfect timing.
On the button. Good.
Hoping to beat 9 o'clock, but that's a lot.